Hi guys, it's Miss Connolly again with your video on a review of what we learned. In case you forgot, here's me. There we are, that gorgeous photo with Mr. Bine. And so we talked about the mucus defense evolution. So if you remember, we had on the first step the variation of the populations. So the variation would be those people that produce a lot of mucus, represented by the big, thick green circles, the people who produce a normal amount of mucus with the smaller circles, and the people who produce almost no mucus at all. So here's our happy little caveman population with their variation. And then the storm cloud comes along with dust. And so what did we expect to happen in step 2 and 3 of evolution? Step 2 being competition, survival of fittest. So they're going to not everyone's going to make it through the dust cloud. And so what happens, we see that the people with a lot of mucus production don't make it because they can't breathe, right? They're coughing up a lung. And the people with no mucus production also don't make it because all the dust gets in their lungs and they die. So what happens? Step 4, the traits of the fittest accumulate. So the people that reproduce, the happy people here, are the ones who make a normal amount of mucus, but then there are also a couple of the others as well, because usually with evolution it doesn't get entirely rid of everything immediately. So then we talked about the environment versus genetics in regards to asthma. So if you remember, asthma can be triggered by a lot of different things in our environment, such as dust, as we see here, or smoke, or spray, or cars, or pet dander. But there's also a genetic component. So we were trying to decide what's the balance between nature and nurture, genetics and the environment, in the case of asthma. And if you remember this twin studies, we like twins because they are genetically identical. And we saw that in the pairs of twins with asthma, with at least one person having asthma, the identical twins, only 59% both pairs having asthma, or both twins having asthma, which means it's not entirely genetic because that number isn't 100%, right? So if it was a completely genetic disease, then people, identical twins with the same genes, if one had asthma, then automatically the other would have asthma. But at the same time, it's not entirely environmental because the non-identical twins, the ones who don't have identical genes, don't all have asthma within the pairs, even though they grew up in similar environments. So again, there's this balance between nature and nurture in the causes of asthma, which also is why we need all of you to become future scientists to help us figure out what's missing in asthma research. All right, and then we talked about the different environmental triggers of asthma. There are a lot of different things that could make you have an attack or make you develop asthma. And now, if we're thinking evolutionarily standpoint, you remember that our caveman population, all they have. Okay, so the question is, why don't we evolve asthma away? So in this, we have to remember that now in everyday life, right, the environment has changed. We have cars, we have factories, we have chemicals, we have all sorts of things in modern life that are that have changed our environment, that are toxic, that we don't want to be breathing in. So what happens in the evolutionary process? Well, for the first step, what was fit is no longer fit, right? The environment changed, so only producing a medium amount of mucus doesn't really work anymore because there's so many things in the environment that we're breathing in that are making us sick. So, but then step 2, what happens? Well, competition has been eliminated by medication, right? It's not that normally in evolution, if the environment changes, there's more toxins in the air, then all the people with only a normal amount of mucus should die. But because of medication, these people, yeah, they're unhappy because they have asthma, but they're still alive because they have their inhalers, except for this guy who didn't do so well. So then, and that leads to, again, instead of survival of just the fittest, it's the survival of the anybody and the everybody. So in the final step, who's reproducing? What are the traits we're seeing in the population? Well, if the people are not getting selected out, if it's the survival of the anybody, then they're going to reproduce, and we're going to see Lots of people with asthma. Unhappy people, medicated people, but people who are surviving. So if the population didn't evolve without asthma because of medications and survival of the anybody, why couldn't an individual evolve asthma away? Well, first of all, it's because individuals don't evolve. Populations do. However, an individual can adapt to its environment. So in the case of asthma, a person will adapt to their environment by developing an asthma action plan, which includes avoiding triggers, adjusting their behavior, and taking medications. But again, this is just a case of an individual adapting to their environment, which is not the same thing as the overall population evolving.